Hey everyone, Dennis Chang here. Welcome to another video. It's been a while since I made a video with a Gypsy guitar. Here I am in Tokyo with this amazing Stringphonic guitar that's on loan to me while during my stay in Tokyo. So for those of you who don't know, Stringphonic is a company based out of Osaka, Japan, and they make these wonderful guitars. They happen to be quite popular in the United States, in Canada, and of course in Japan. And this one in particular, which is for sale, is actually, and I'm very honest here, I'm not saying this because I'm trying to promote them, but this is actually the best Stringphonic that I've ever tried. And it's a used guitar, but it looks almost brand new, just a little bit of wear around the sound hole. I guess the previous owner put some kind of pickup or something. But yeah, it's quite frankly the best Stringphonic that I've ever tried. It's an advanced model. I don't know which year, but if you're interested in the guitar, leave a comment or something. It's being sold by Stringphonic directly, so I'll put you guys in touch if you're interested. Of course, I'm personally used to playing acoustically, so the guitar is set up for that kind of playing. If you're used to amplification with like super low action, well, obviously you can change the setup, but the way it's set up right now, it's set up for acoustic playing, and it does have a bit of a chunky neck, so it might not be for everyone. But personally, I don't have huge hands, but I still managed to make it sound okay, and it feels comfortable. In my honest opinion, this guitar competes quite nicely with guitars that are twice the price. Quite honestly, I would buy this guitar if I could justify the purchase, which I cannot. So once again, thank you so much to Stringphonics Guitars for supplying me with this amazing instrument and for giving me this awesome t-shirt. So for the past few weeks, I've been making videos about how to practice jazz guitar. And today, again, it's a continuation of all that. So if you haven't already, be sure to watch all the previous videos because it's building on what we talked about, especially what we talked about last week, the past 2 weeks where I talked about the blues and then the rhythm changes. And today we're going to be talking about the idea of playing over changes. Once more, I need to plug my business. These videos that I make for free take quite a lot of time to make, and I would really appreciate it if you could leave a comment, you could subscribe, you can like, you can share, something. And if you want to compensate me somehow, then please check out some of the courses on SoundSlice or on DC Music School. You'll find all the links in the description box. I have a series of courses on SoundSlice for people who are new to Gypsy Jazz. And I also have a series that I'm quite proud of about jazz guitar harmony taught from a historical perspective. And what we're going to talk about today is based on what I teach in that video series. So those of you who've been watching my videos, been liking, subscribing, or even buying something on SoundSlice or DC Music School, thank you so very much. I really appreciate it. And it's what allows me to continue to make these free YouTube videos. Okay, so today's topic about playing the changes. We're going to use a very common chord progression in jazz. Well, maybe not common, but a very popular one anyway. One that you're going to eventually encounter for sure. And it was arguably popularized by a few of Cole Porter's compositions, namely Night and Day and Just One of Those Things. Night and Day in particular is one of the most popular standards out there. And it's also a bit of an interesting one because it's an old song from the swing era of jazz. Not only is it played by gypsy jazz players, it is also played by trad jazz players, and it is played by contemporary jazz players. So you have the trifecta right there. Oh, and singers love to sing it too. So it's probably one of those songs where eventually you should probably know it in all 12 keys because of those singers. We're not here to talk about that tune in particular, but about this very specific chord progression, which a lot of jazz musicians then eventually use to write their own compositions or to reharmonize other songs. So Joe Pass has this tune called Stay Loose that uses this descending chromatic chord progression, which I'll play for you shortly. And there's also a song by Django Reinhardt called Djangology that makes use of this chord progression as well. So today, since I'm playing the Gypsy jazz guitar, we're going to do it with Djangology. And Djangology is in the key of G. It's namely the A section. It's A, A, B, A. We're not going to worry about the B part. So the A section, it's going to have this descending bass line. C sharp for 1 bar, C 1 bar, B 1 bar, B flat 1 bar, A minor, D, G. And it goes like this if I put chords on top of it. I would do it here. So that's the A section. Now the chords that go on top of the bass line will depend on the song. It depends also on the melody. But in this case, these, I would say for Djangology, these are probably the chords that most people play. I mean, these are the chords that Django's rhythm players played. So what did I play? I played C sharp half diminished, followed by C minor, or C minor 6, G over B, B flat diminished, and Gypsy jazz players like to add this little F sharp on top, a little nice decoration note, and then 2, 5, 1. If we were playing in other songs such as Night and Day, it would probably be preferable to play C sharp minor 7 flat 5, then C minor 7, B minor 7, B flat diminished, just so that it fits the melody a little bit better. And later on, we're going to look at a few other songs where maybe we change 1 or 2 notes here and there so that you have different voicings that fit the melodies better. So today's video is going to be about the same topic that I've been talking about in many of my previous YouTube videos, and it's about harmonic direction. Just so that I don't repeat myself too much, I suggest you watch my previous video on rhythm changes, where I do spend a bit of time explaining that concept. And of course, I also suggest you check out my harmony courses on SoundSlice, where I really go in depth. So harmonic direction, this is very, very important because a lot of beginner jazz students are repeatedly told how important it is to play the changes. It's one of the conventional wisdoms of jazz education, and it's not false. Of course, it's true that learning to play the changes is quite important, but very few people actually go on to explain what playing the changes actually really means. And this is actually where you can tell the difference between a real jazz player or teacher and someone who teaches out of a textbook or repeats what they were told from their teachers, who were probably not great players themselves, or maybe just brainwashed by the educational system. Any real good jazz player will tell you it's less about the chord symbols, the exact chord symbols when you look at a lead sheet. So it's less about the exact chord symbols and more about the movement of the harmonies. So I'm going to purposely make this vague, but it'll be more accurate. It is about understanding tension and release. And so that when you understand this, you can phrase accordingly. And if you don't believe me, go ahead and check out the best players. I'm talking about like the old players, like swing players, trad jazz, gypsy jazz, bebop, and many contemporary players as well. The way they improvise is actually according to this concept of tension and release. What that basically means is that jazz players use their experience and intuition to choose which chords to outline and, when necessary, which chords to ignore. And it's quite a subjective art, and different musicians will have different opinions, which is why you'll have all these players who will have very, very different styles. And that's the beauty of it. You need to develop the confidence and experience to make your own choices. And that's also one of the reasons why I generally don't like to teach anymore, at least unless students come with very, very specific questions, because there are so many pathways available, and it's, rather than list all the possibilities, it's better to gravitate towards something you like. But that's another topic altogether. Now, when you're choosing which chords to outline, you may actually choose to superimpose other harmonies. And sometimes these harmonies that you superimpose have absolutely nothing to do with whatever you're playing over. Basically, if you freeze the phrase in time and you look at things vertically, like the chord symbols and versus what you played or whatever a musician played, sometimes it might make no sense whatsoever because the line might have absolutely nothing to do with the actual chord. But if you unfreeze things and you look at the context, you look at what came before and what comes after, then things make sense. And that's because it's all about the horizontal movement. And this is what I call harmonic direction. And this is basically what we're going to be talking about over this descending chromatic progression that we find in Night and Day, or in this case, Djangology. So earlier, I talked about different variations on chord qualities. For instance, it can be C minor 6, C minor 6, C minor 7, C minor triad. It can even be C diminished. There's a certain level of flexibility involved because it depends on the melody. But from the perspective of an improviser, anything goes. Because like I said, it is less about the exact chord symbol. So there is a higher degree of flexibility in terms of choice. And just keep in mind, just like in rhythm changes that I talked about last week, to a certain extent, it does not matter too much what the accompanist is doing. You'll be able to superimpose all the harmonies that I'm going to show you. And furthermore, I won't be showing you an exhaustive list of things. I'm just going to show you the basics and the common ones. Now, even if the things that you're superimposing does not fit the actual harmony, it might not necessarily sound bad. And it really depends, actually. It's not an exact science. It's not like there's a formula to follow. Because if you have someone doing something like some kind of piano style comping, hopefully they won't get in the way too much, so that if you do something that's kind of doesn't fit, it won't sound too dissonant. But sometimes a little bit of dissonance is not so bad, just as long as it doesn't clash too hard. In gypsy jazz, where you have players playing chords all the time, a lot of players will play quote-unquote incorrect notes, but it doesn't sound bad, at least to my ears. You just have to use your ears and your intuition to guide you. So if something is starting to sound a little bit too bad, maybe it's because you're insisting on it too much, or maybe it's also the rhythm player's fault, who knows. But a little tiny bit of crunch isn't so bad. But for now, let's look at the harmonic direction of the progression. Essentially, it works in pairs of tension and resolution. You have this first part, that is essentially going to this chord, which is a G over B, but let's just say G. So you have this. Tension, tension, resolution. And then you have this B flat diminished chord, which we're going to skip for a second. And after that, you have A minor 7, D7, and G, which is a regular 2-5-1. So hopefully you're at least familiar with that much. So this B flat diminished chord is just a passing chord that connects both pairs. So you have this G chord, it connects this G chord to the A minor chord. You can see it visually too on the guitar. If I just did this, see how smooth the connection is? It's a chromatic connection. So from a very loose point of view, as long as you resolve to G here, so here and here, what comes before does not matter to a certain extent. Basically, there are some people who kind of just play in the key of G-ish or do some kind of bluesy thing over the entire thing. And one person to check out if you're into that style of playing is actually Stefan Grappelli, who's recorded this song a number of times, and there are a number of videos of him on YouTube. And you can hear him doing something like that over this chord progression. But before thinking it's that easy, it's really just like the rhythm changes in the blues that we talked about the previous weeks. So watch those. It's all about the phrasing and understanding the points of tension and release. So just going up and down like a G blues or major or minor scale isn't really gonna work. So if you're really interested in learning to play over these changes without exactly playing the changes, I really suggest you check out Grappelli's numerous solos over this tune. For instance, over the first chord, he often plays some kind of line that's based off of E minor. And then often for the C minor, he'll do some bluesy thing, like even play the note B flat, which brings out the C minor 7 sound. But anyway, check it out. You'll get an idea of what I'm talking about if you study some of his solos. And just remember from my previous videos, it's not either or, it's a spectrum. So I'm not saying that Grappelli is always missing the changes. Sometimes he'll play the changes, but sometimes he won't. I feel that if this were the spectrum here where you really don't play the changes and you really outline the changes, I would say that Grappelli tends to be right here and Django tends to be more here. I think that when you're a bit too extreme on the spectrum, it tends not to sound too good, or it sounds mechanical. Well, if it's this side where you're not playing the changes, it sounds like you don't know what you're doing. And if you're too much into the chords, it almost sounds like a mathematical formula. So I feel that to really sound musical, you should be somewhere within the spectrum, but not at the extreme. So now that we've gotten that out of the way, this idea of not really playing the changes, let's talk about actually interpreting the changes. So the first 3 bars, you have the C sharp minor 7 flat 5 to C minor to G. So the most common way to think about this is to think of it as a 2-5-1. This C sharp minor 7 flat 5, think of it as an A9 chord, because C sharp minor 7 flat 5 is found within A9. And then this C minor, how does this fit in? Think of it as some kind of a fancy D7 with a flat 9. Because if you watch some of my previous videos, I don't know which ones, but I did talk about one of the most common substitutions over a dominant chord, and that's the 4 minor over D7. Jazz musicians back in the day love to play C minor over D7. It's a sound that Django used, that even Louis Armstrong used, that Charlie Christian used, like a lot of the jazz greats. It's a very old trick. So there we go, A7, D7. So it's really just a 2-5-1 with some special colors. And what's very interesting to note is that in Djangology, the melody is actually outlining a D7 flat 9 chord, D13 with a flat 9. So it's actually, the melody itself is actually outlining this D7 flat 9. But if you listen to the accompanist, they're playing a C minor. So it doesn't 100% fit, but does it sound bad? No, it doesn't, does it? It doesn't sound too dissonant. So that's what I mean when I say that a little bit of dissonance isn't necessarily always perceivable, nor is it necessarily a bad thing. So if you're going to practice arpeggios, then for this first chord, beyond practicing a C sharp minor 7 flat 5 arpeggio, you can practice your E minor arpeggio. And the next chord, you can practice your C minor arpeggios. And then to G. And if you really want to bring out that D7 sound, then you can play this nice arpeggio. It's a D13 with a flat 9 arpeggio. And if you want to go even further, so what did I play? C, E flat, F sharp, B, and then E flat, F sharp. Okay, so that's one way that you interpret this first part. Then we're going to ignore the B flat again, the B flat diminished, sorry, and let's look at the 2-5-1. Well, guess what? It's just a 2-5-1. So chances are, if you're a jazz guitar student, you probably know kind of what to do over it. I mean, there are a lot of things you can do, but we're not gonna open that can of worms. So let's go back to the B flat diminished. Let's go back to the B flat diminished chord. Like I said earlier, it's a passing chord that comes from voice leading. And if you want to know its kind of historical origins, then I would suggest you check out my Sound Slice course. I think I may have even explained in some of my previous videos. I don't know which ones. And like I said, guitarists often use this voicing with this F sharp on top, which gives you a little hint, because this is a nice note that you can play over this chord. But since it is a passing chord, there is also the option to completely ignore it. Now, whether it will sound too dissonant or not will depend on a number of factors, as I said earlier. How much you insist on the wrong notes. For example, if you choose to ignore it and you stay on G, and if you insist too much on a note, like let's say this B natural, while the rhythm player is playing, you know, it might sound bad. But again, that really depends. How much is the accompanist insisting on the chord? How audible is the chord? For example, if we're playing this song as a ballad, and we get to here, and the rhythm player is doing like, then that insisting on a B natural too much might not sound good. But for example, if you play B natural in passing, then it might not sound bad. However, it is also interesting to note that only if you play a G major scale, not that I think in terms of scales, but if you do play a G major scale, the only notes that sound bad over this B flat diminished chord would be the B natural and the D natural. And let's just say the C as well, because it's in between. But if you play the other four notes, it actually sounds good. So you can kind of organize your solos in such a way where over the B flat diminished chord, you avoid the notes B and D, or if you play them in passing only. And when you focus on these notes, these other notes that work, it kind of sounds melodic. And this leads me to my next topic. Again, lots of jazz students are taught the importance of aligning the changes to the point that sometimes some may go way too far with it. And it is especially apparent on a chord progression like this, where people turn it into some kind of mathematical etude. Right? If you only play this way, like arpeggios, like nailing the changes like that, it starts to sound too much like an exercise. This extremely deliberate way of playing the changes is almost like a 3-year-old outside. Mommy, mommy, look, the sky's blue. Mommy, mommy, look, it's a choo-choo train. Mommy, mommy, look, it's a bus. No kidding, Sherlock. It's the same thing. Hey, look, I know what the chords are. I know what the chords are, huh? Notice that? I played the C minor chord. I played this. You notice I played the C minor chord. When you listen to actual good improvisers playing over this progression or any other progression, you rarely hear this kind of academic sound. I mean, sometimes it can be done as an effect to make it sound like a classical etude or something, which does have its place. But my point is that you probably wouldn't want to make this, how do you say, the core of your improvisation. So just because something can be done and just because it's actually theoretically correct does not mean that it will actually sound good. What I really suggest is to be as musical as possible. But what does that mean? Well, it's quite related to what I talked about in the previous weeks, where I was talking about the blues, and I was talking about rhythm changes, and also about phrasing. Phrasing, playing melodic ideas, understanding tension and release, good voice leading. These are all different aspects of musicality, in my opinion. Basically, there is a way to outline the changes without showing everyone that you're specifically outlining the changes. And this is actually different from what I was talking about earlier when Grappelli sometimes didn't play the changes. But he actually really didn't play the changes. Like sometimes he'll play the note E over C minor because it's in passing. It's in the context of some kind of bluesy line. And this is also different from what I was talking about earlier when I was saying the spectrum thing, where you don't play the changes, where really you actually do not play the changes at all. Like sometimes Grappelli or someone else, they'll play over the C minor chord, they'll play the note E natural because it's in passing as part of some bluesy idea. In passing. What I'm talking about here is literally playing notes that fit each chord, but without making it sound like this. Look, over the first chord, these notes sound really good. And then for the next chord, if you avoid the note E, you can add the note C. And then after the next chord, G, you can play all the notes of the G major scale. Then B flat diminished, we do the thing where we avoid the notes B, C, D. And then finally going back to the 2-5-1, you have the G major scale again. And then you end up with something like this. It's something that I played in my intro video. So basically what I did is I played with common tones across the chords, finding which chords are in common between each pair of chords. And then after I played with voice leading and I played with phrasing. It's like that song, There Will Never Be Another You, at the end, where you have all these different harmonizations, but you have da 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 da. You have all these chords, but the melody is just from the E flat major scale. Because it is choosing all the common tones. So instead of thinking of all these different chord scales and being able to play like a whole wide range of alphabets over a given chord, try to minimize things and look at what's in common between each pair. And notice how the progression is going in a downward fashion. Of course, you can do that in your solo as well, but instead of doing that, why not kind of stay within the same range or maybe even go up? So if you have I don't know what I did. So G major, B flat diminished, A minor, so thinking this way might help develop your melodic sensibilities. And of course, it's a lot easier said than done. It requires a lot of listening, a lot of ear training. But I think it's fun to work on. Nowadays, teachers will show you all these scales, all these arpeggios, all these target note exercises, like playing, like targeting the guide tones and all that. I have nothing against any of that, and I have on occasion worked on those things. It can be fun to practice from time to time, but just remember that these exercises are merely exercises. And you should actually understand why you even practice such exercises. What is the purpose? I guess the purpose of this is to just map out your fingerboard to know where the notes are. But like I said again, it's kind of like that analogy of the 3-year-old. Just because you know where the notes are doesn't mean that you should tell everyone, hey, guys, there's a C sharp on the C sharp minor 7 flat 5. Because it starts, and especially over a chord progression like this, it starts to sound like a mathematical formula, like an exercise. So doing a lot of listening and working on actual melodic vocabulary is, well, I can't stress the importance enough. And now we're going to get to my favorite part. I go really in depth in my harmony course, but I want to explain to you why this chord progression is very interesting and how you can manipulate it to end up with different harmonic possibilities. Let's skip the first 2 chords, which were this, and just look at this part. G over B, B flat diminished, 2, 5, back to 1. If you were to simplify it, it's actually just G, D7, and you find this in many songs. You find this in Dinah. Dinah, is there anyone finer in the state of Carolina? See? G, D, G7. G, D7 to G. And therefore over Dinah, the rhythm section could actually do this. Well, actually it doesn't really fit the melody, but check it out. See, I did the Djangology progression there. And this, you find this in other songs like I Can't Give You But Love. I can't give you anything but love. I can give you anything but love. Coquette. You can even find this in the blues. If you just look at the old blues, one of the old blues anyway. Here. You find this in Out of Nowhere at the very end. In so many songs, you find this at the end of Days of Wine and Roses. Okay, so it's basically 1-5-1, and you find this practically most of the standards out there. So let's look at this B flat diminished chord. One of the coolest substitutions you can use over the B flat diminished chord, if we go here on the guitar, you see that if you just change this note here, you get an F sharp 7 chord. So then you have, it's a song called When Day Is Done. And what's very cool is that if you're using this as an improviser, like the rhythm player is playing this, but you as a soloist start playing an F sharp chord. This is a sound that you can hear a lot of old players use, and off the top of my head, if you check out one version of Oscar Peterson playing Night and Day, he uses this arpeggio. They're playing Night and Day in the key of E flat. So over the G flat diminished chord, Oscar Peterson plays a D arpeggio. So this was Djangology, but if you looked at Night and Day, I told you the chords would actually be B minor 7, just so that it fits the melody better. B flat diminished to A minor 7. B minor 7, why is that? Because B minor 7 are the upper extensions of a G major 7 chord. Look, G major 7. If I take out this note, there's a B minor in there, so I turn it to B minor 7. B minor 7 is essentially a G major 9 chord. So if you think, instead of G major, we play a B minor 7, and we have to get to A minor, but we have a B flat diminished in between. What if we ignore the B flat diminished and play B flat minor? So that's one of the most common jazz sounds out there, and there's a song called Groovin' High that I think actually uses that progression. You see that in other chord progression. Miles Davis, this is 4. Or in the melody of this Django song, Webster. Some people play B7, which is kind of a substitute for F sharp minor 7. It's like a little chromatic thing. So then you have this chromatic possibility. So basically this B flat diminished is a transition chord. It's a passing chord. And therefore it's less about the chord itself. It's about getting from G to A minor. And what's the most popular way to get from G to A minor? You guessed it, it's an E7 chord. So when you improvise, you can play some kind of E7 idea over the B flat diminished, even though it has nothing to do with B flat diminished. And one person that's very fond of that would be Stokolo Rosenberg. But then let's reverse engineer things. I talk a lot about this in my harmony course. But check out a song like the last 8 bars of All of Me. You took the part that once was my heart, so why not take all of me? Well, after the F minor, it goes back to C, right? But then you can do all the things I told you about. So you can do, so you took the part that once was my heart. It actually fits. So why not take all You took the part that once was my heart. Change the notes here. So why not take all of me? So basically when I'm improvising over the last 8 of all of me, I have all these harmonic possibilities available to me as well. Now let's look at the entire chord progression again. We're starting from the C sharp minor 7 flat 5. I want to show you where you can reharmonize certain songs using this chord progression. Or if you check out Django's version of just one of those things, he does breathe down, da, 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 da. So that chord progression. Originally it's supposed to be B, but Django does B flat major. So 4 minor. So check it out. If it fits the melody, which it does, you took the part that once was my heart. So I did F sharp minor 7 flat 5. It's a kind of a substitute because look, F major 7. Just take the root, bring it up half step, and you have this. Why would you do this? Just to make things a little bit funkier, really. A little bit more hip. And if you check out Diana Krall's version of Almost Like Being in Love, the bass player is doing that right off the bat. The second chord is a little bit problematic. The bass player is playing E flat minor, but I think the rhythm guitar player is playing like an F7 chord. So E minor 7 flat 5. And this where maybe you change the note a little bit. Instead of playing E flat minor, you do like maybe, well, F7 over E flat. There's also this song, this standard, Everything Happens to Me. Okay? So it's A, B, A, and the last A I've seen people do this. That same thing. And just the other day, my Tokyo buddy Daiki showed me this reharmonization of Charles Trenet, this French song, Que reste-t-il de nos amours, which has an English title, I Wish You Love. It goes da 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 da. So A B A, but at the end da 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 da. You can do the same thing, just for fun, you know, after you've gone. After you've gone and left me crying, after you've gone, there's no time left. Boom. Mais il m'entend. Let alone. Let alone. Let alone. Just friends. Lovers no more. Da 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 da. See? So I hope this video was of use to you. I didn't really teach you exactly how to play over these songs. I just gave you things to think about, and hopefully it will motivate you and encourage you to check out what others are playing over this chord progression so that you can come up with your own ideas. Check out that Oscar Peterson solo on Night and Day. I don't know how many times he recorded, but if you can find it, there's a version where, again, over that, if I'm not mistaken, over that G flat diminished chord, he'll play D triad, or sometimes he'll play G flat minor. So it's all in the context of G minor 7, G flat minor, F minor this. So he does a few different things over it. So that's a good one to study. Check out Django's solos. Go to my DC Music School. Check out how players improvise over 9 days, see which chords they're ignoring. I seem to recall in one of my DC music school lessons, Adrien Moignard, instead of playing C sharp minor 7 flat 5, he plays a G major 7 arpeggio. Why is that? Because he's thinking A7. And when you're thinking A7, you can think E minor. And when you think E minor, you have G major. But really, the whole point of me making today's video is to get you to think about these things, to think about what playing the changes really, really mean. So there we go. Good luck.